January 27, 1945. Dawn breaks over southern Poland. Soviet soldiers of the 60th Army approach a place whose name will become synonymous with evil itself, Auschwitz. They have no idea what they are about to discover. Behind the wire, 7,000 emaciated prisoners wait in the freezing cold, the last survivors of humanity's greatest crime. This is the story of that day, the day the world learned the full truth of the Holocaust, the day Auschwitz was liberated. Auschwitz was not one camp. It was an industrial complex of death spanning 25 square miles. Auschwitz I, the original camp, built in 1940 for Polish political prisoners. Capacity, 20,000. Auschwitz II-Birkenau, the killing center, built in 1941 for gas chambers, for crematoria. Capacity for mass murder, for 1,400 people per day. Auschwitz III Monowitz, slave labor for the chemical company IG Farben, 40 subcamps, work until death. Between 1940 and 1945, the Nazis sent 1.3 million people to Auschwitz. 1.1 million were murdered. 90% were Jews. Men, women, children. Families erased from existence. This was the culmination of Hitler's final solution, the systematic extermination of European Jewry. The railway led directly into Birkenau. Cattle cars, packed beyond capacity. Days without food, water, air. When the doors opened, SS doctors waited. Left, right, life, death. Those deemed fit for labor, maybe 25%, were registered as prisoners. The rest, children, elderly, the weak, went straight to the gas chambers. They were told they were going to shower. The gas chambers were designed for efficiency. Victims were told to undress, fold their clothes neatly, remember their hook numbers. They would need them after the shower. They entered a large room, fake shower heads in the ceiling, doors sealed behind them. Then the Zyklon B pellets dropped through vents in the roof. Death came in 15 to 20 minutes. Suffocation, panic, families clinging to each other. Then the Sonderkommando, Jewish prisoners forced to work the crematoria, dragged the bodies out, removed gold teeth, cut off hair for textile production. The bodies burned. The ashes spread in nearby ponds or used as fertilizer. No graves, no names, no trace. At peak operation in 1944, Birkenau murdered 6,000 Jews per day. This is what the Soviet soldiers were walking toward. By January 1945, the Red Army was advancing rapidly into Poland. The Nazis knew Auschwitz would be overrun. They began evacuating the camp, not to save the prisoners, but to hide the evidence. January 17th through 21st, nearly 60,000 prisoners were forced on death marches westward. In the dead of winter, without food, without rest. Anyone who collapsed was shot on the spot. 15,000 died on the roads. Frozen bodies lined the route. The SS took the healthy, those who could still work, still be exploited. They left behind the sick, the dying, the children too weak to walk. 7,000 souls remained at Auschwitz, waiting in the cold. The SS also worked frantically to destroy evidence, burn documents, blow up crematoria, erase the crime, but they ran out of time. The men approaching Auschwitz were veterans of the Red Army's 60th Army, part of the 1st Ukrainian Front. They had fought across thousands of miles, from Stalingrad to Kursk, through Belarus and Poland. They had liberated Soviet cities and villages decimated by Nazi occupation. They had seen atrocities, mass graves, burned villages, summary executions, but nothing would prepare them for what they were about to find. The 60th Army was commanded by General Pavel Kurykin. On January 12th, they launched the Vistula Oder Offensive, a massive push to liberate Poland and drive toward Berlin. By January 26th, advanced units were approaching the Auschwitz area. Soviet intelligence had received reports about Auschwitz. Polish resistance fighters had been sending information for years about a massive camp complex. Trains arriving full, leaving empty. Smoke from the chimneys. Whispers of mass murder. But the scale, the industrial nature of the killing, was beyond comprehension. Major Anatoly Shapiro, a Jewish Red Army officer, would later write, "We knew it was a camp. We knew prisoners were there. We thought maybe political prisoners, Soviet POWs. We expected harsh conditions, brutality. We did not expect hell on earth. January 27, 1945, 9 a.m. Reconnaissance units from the 100th Infantry Division and 322nd Rifle Division approached the Auschwitz complex. They expect resistance. The area has been recently evacuated, but there could be rear guard SS units. They move cautiously through the snow. The fence appears ahead. Barbed wire. Watchtowers. But no guards. The camp seems abandoned. Then they hear something. Faint. Distant. Voices. 11 a.m. Soviet troops reach the perimeter of Auschwitz I. Senior Sergeant Yakov Vinchensky later described the moment. We cut the wire. We entered. And then we saw them. Skeletons in striped rags. Eyes hollow. Barely human. Some tried to walk toward us but collapsed. Others just stared. Like ghosts. One man whispered in Russian, "Are you real?" I didn't know what to say. I couldn't speak. The soldiers distribute what little food they have. Some prisoners, starving for so long, eat too quickly and die from the shock. Others weep. Others are silent, numb. Major Anatoly Shapiro, who arrived shortly after, recalls, "I am Jewish. These are my people, and I am too late. Too late for the million already murdered. I can only help the 7,000 left behind to die. The survivors, if they could be called that, are in unimaginable condition. Average weight, 60 to 80 pounds. Starvation, typhus, tuberculosis, frostbite. Many are too weak to stand. Some lie in their own waste, unable to move. The Soviet medics begin treating them immediately, but for many, it's too late. Hundreds die in the first days after liberation. Their bodies simply cannot recover. Private Ivan Martinushkin, a medic, wrote in his diary, "I have seen wounded soldiers with limbs blown off. I have seen burn victims. I have seen men die screaming. But I have never seen this. People reduced to bones. Eyes that have seen things I cannot imagine. Children who look like old men. This is not war. This is something else. Something evil beyond words." Among the 7,000 survivors are more than 500 children, not orphans. That word implies they had parents who died naturally. These children's parents were murdered, gassed, burned. The youngest is a 3-year-old boy, barely alive. Twins who survived Dr. Mendel's experiments. Teenagers who watched their entire families disappear into the gas chambers. Soviet photographer Georgy Elisavetsky captures some of the first images. He later said, "I was ordered to document everything, but when I saw the children, I couldn't lift the camera at first. These are children. They should be playing, learning, growing. Instead, they have numbers tattooed on their arms. They have seen their parents killed. They have learned that the world is a place of pure cruelty." But he does photograph them, because the world must know. Some of those photographs, the children showing their tattooed numbers, will become among the most iconic images of the Holocaust. As the Soviets explore the camp, they discover warehouses, vast storage facilities of prisoners called Canada, because they seemed impossibly rich. Inside, the possessions of the murdered. Warehouse 1, 836,000 women's coats and dresses, neatly sorted by type, prepared for shipment to Germany. Warehouse 2, 348,000 men's suits, stripped from the dead. Warehouse 3, 38,000 pairs of men's shoes, 110,000 pairs of children's shoes, tiny shoes, shoes of toddlers. Warehouse 4, mountains of eyeglasses, tens of thousands of pairs, broken dreams of seeing another day. Warehouse 5, 7 tons of human hair, shaved from the murdered, packed for shipment to German textile factories. It would be woven into cloth for uniforms and mattresses. Captain Vladimir Klemenko, one of the first officers to enter the warehouses, breaks down. "I am a soldier. I have fought Nazis for 4 years. I thought I understood what we were fighting against. But this systematic theft, this industrial processing of human beings, their belongings sorted, their hair cut, their gold teeth extracted, they turn people into products. This is not just murder. This is something for which we have no word. At Birkenau, the Soviets find crematoria, or what's left of them. In their final days, the SS blew up crematoria 2, 3, and 4. They tried to erase the evidence of the killing machinery, but they didn't finish. The ruins remain. Enough to understand the purpose. Soviet engineers descend into the underground gas chambers. The fake shower heads are still visible. Scratches on the walls. Fingernails of the dying clawing for escape. Nearby, mountains of ash. Human ash. The remains of hundreds of thousands, dumped in ponds and pits. Major Yuri Kukrov, a military investigator, begins documenting everything. We must record this. We must preserve this. Because if we don't, if we just tell people what we saw, they won't believe us. No one will believe that humans could do this to other humans. So we photograph. We measure. We count. We interview survivors. We build the evidence. Because the world must know. And the guilty must be held accountable. Among the survivors is a 25-year-old Italian Jewish chemist named Primo Levi. Prisoner number 174517. He will survive, and he will spend the rest of his life bearing witness. In his memoir, If This Is a Man, Levi describes a moment of liberation. The Germans had fled. We were free, or so we thought. But freedom, when it came, felt strange. We had lived so long as less than human. We had forgotten what it meant to be human. The Russians arrived. They did not greet us with celebration. They looked at us with horror, pity, shame. We were the proof of what man could become, the proof of what civilization could sink to. Some of us wept. Some of us were silent. Some of us were so damaged we felt nothing at all. How do you return from hell? How do you re-enter the world of the living when you have been a corpse for so long? Levi will spend 40 years trying to answer that question. 15-year-old Elie Wiesel was not liberated at Auschwitz. 10 days before the Soviets arrived, he and his father were forced on a death march to Buchenwald. His father died there days before American troops arrived. But Wiesel's words about his Auschwitz experience will echo for generations. Never shall I forget that night, the first night in camp that turned my life into one long night 7 times sealed. Never shall I forget that smoke. Never shall I forget the small faces of the children whose bodies I saw transformed into smoke under a silent sky. Never shall I forget those flames that consumed my faith forever. Never shall I forget the nocturnal silence that deprived me for all eternity of the desire to live. Never shall I forget those moments that murder my God and my soul and turn my dreams to ashes. Never shall I forget those things, even were I condemned to live as long as God himself. Never. He will win the Nobel Peace Prize in 1986. He will dedicate his life to ensuring the world never forgets. Among the survivors is a 55-year-old Dutch Jewish businessman named Otto Frank. He was arrested in Amsterdam in August 1944 after 25 months in hiding. The secret annex betrayed. He was sent to Auschwitz with his wife Edith and his daughters Margot and Anne on the selection ramp. The family was separated. He never saw his wife and daughters again. Edith starved to death in Auschwitz in January 1945, days before liberation. Margot and Anne were transferred to Bergen-Belsen, where both died of typhus in March 1945, weeks before British troops liberated that camp. Otto Frank is the only member of his family to survive. When he returns to Amsterdam after liberation, Miepgies, one of the Dutch people who hid his family, hands him a small notebook and his diary. Miep had saved it from the Gestapo raid. Otto will spend the rest of his life sharing his daughter's words. The Diary of Anne Frank will become one of the most widely read books in history. But on January 27, 1945, he is just another skeleton in striped rags, liberated by Soviet soldiers, wondering why he survived when his beloved wife and daughters did not. Among the 7,000 survivors, many are women, and their stories reveal specific horrors. Pregnant women sent immediately to the gas chambers. Mothers forced to watch their children murdered. Medical experiments. Sexual violence. Forced sterilization. Dr. Gisela Pearl, a Hungarian Jewish gynecologist, survived by becoming a camp doctor and making an impossible choice. I performed abortions in secret with my bare hands. No instruments. No anesthesia. Because if the SS discovered a woman was pregnant, both mother and child would be killed immediately. I killed those babies to save the mothers. I became a murderer to preserve life. How do you live with that? After liberation, Dr. Pearl nearly commits suicide. She eventually immigrates to America and dedicates her life to delivering babies. Over 3,000 births. Bringing life into the world to atone for what she was forced to do. Ruth Kluger, a survivor who was 13 at liberation. People asked what the worst part was. The hunger? The beatings? The fear of death? The worst part was being stripped of dignity. Being reduced to a number. Being treated as vermin. Being told, every moment of every day, that you do not deserve to exist. The body can survive starvation. The soul, that's harder to save. The Soviet liberators are combat veterans. They have seen death. They have killed. They have watched comrades die. But Auschwitz breaks them. Private Viktor Grichenko writes home to his wife, "Darling, I cannot describe what I have seen. I do not have words. I do not think words exist. I have nightmares now. Even when I am awake, I see the faces of the children, the piles of shoes, the hair. We are supposed to be happy. We liberated them. We are heroes, but we are too late. Too late for the million who were murdered. We saved 7,000, but 1.1 million died. How do we celebrate that? Many Soviet soldiers who liberated Auschwitz will struggle with trauma for the rest of their lives. Some will never speak of what they saw, the memory too painful to revisit. The Soviet government faces a dilemma. They want to publicize Nazi atrocities, to justify the war, to demonstrate Soviet heroism, but they do not want to emphasize that the victims were primarily Jewish. Stalin's Soviet Union is officially anti-religious and increasingly anti-Semitic, so the official Soviet narrative becomes generic. Fascist death camp liberates innocent victims of many nationalities. The word Jew is minimized. The specific targeting of European Jewry, the core of the Holocaust, is downplayed. This will have lasting consequences. For decades, Soviet memorials and textbooks will describe Auschwitz victims as Soviet citizens, Poles, political prisoners, but rarely as Jews. Only after the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991 will the full truth be openly acknowledged in former Soviet countries. But in 1945, the soldiers at Auschwitz know exactly what they found: the murder factory of the Jewish people. In the weeks after liberation, Soviet investigators launch a comprehensive documentation effort. They interview survivors. They photograph everything. They measure the gas chambers. They count the warehouses of stolen goods. They exhume mass graves. They test the residue in the gas chambers, confirming Zyklon B. They compile statistics. Total sent to Auschwitz, 1.3 million. Total murdered, 1.1 million, including 1 million Jews. Survivors liberated January 27, 1945, 7000. Children found, 500 plus. Nationalities represented, 28 countries. They identify key perpetrators. Rudolf Haas, camp commandant, 1940 to 1943. Richard Baer, commandant, 1944 to 1945. Joseph Mengele, camp doctor, conducted medical experiments. Joseph Kramer, commandant of Birkenau, 1944. This evidence will form the foundation of the Nuremberg trials and later prosecutions. Some perpetrators are captured. Some escape. Mengele flees to South America and dies in Brazil in 1979, never brought to justice. But the evidence, the irrefutable documentation, will ensure that Auschwitz cannot be denied, cannot be minimized, cannot be forgotten. The first news reports from Auschwitz reached the outside world in early February 1945. Soviet journalist Yuri Kromov files one of the earliest dispatches. "I have seen the gates of hell. I have walked through the valley of death. I have witnessed the remnants of the greatest crime in human history. Auschwitz is not a prison. It is not a labor camp. It is a factory designed to murder human beings on an industrial scale. The Nazis built this. They planned it. They refined it. They operated it with the efficiency of an automobile plant. except the product was death. The raw material was human lives, and the output was ash and silence. But the world struggles to comprehend. In the West, skepticism lingers. Surely this is Soviet propaganda? Surely the reports are exaggerated? It will take months and the liberation of camps by American and British forces before the full truth is accepted. In the spring of 1945, American and British forces liberate camps in Germany. April 11, 1945, Americans reach Buchenwald. Tens of thousands of near-dead prisoners. April 15, 1945, British liberate Bergen-Belsen. And in Margot, Frank died here weeks before. 10,000 unburied corpses. Typhus epidemic. British forces forced to use bulldozers to bury the dead. April 29, 1945, Americans liberate Dachau. SS guards executed by enraged American soldiers. May 5, 1945, Mauthausen liberated. Emaciated prisoners greet American tanks. Now the Western world sees it directly. Western photographers document it. Western newspapers publish it. Eisenhower orders German civilians to tour the camps, to see what was done in their name. Eisenhower later writes, "The things I saw beggar description. The visual evidence and the verbal testimony of starvation, cruelty, and bestiality were so overpowering as to leave me a bit sick. I visited every nook and cranny of the camp because I felt it my duty to be in a position from then on to testify at first hand about these things in case there ever grew up at home the belief that the stories of Nazi brutality were just propaganda." But by the time the West sees Dachau and Bergen-Belsen, Auschwitz has already been liberated for 3 months. The Soviets were first. They saw the worst. And for years, their testimony was doubted. November 20th, 1945, the International Military Tribunal opens in Nuremberg, Germany, the world's first international war crimes trial. 24 Nazi leaders in the dock. The prosecution presents evidence from Auschwitz, photographs, survivor testimony, Nazi documents proving the systematic nature of the genocide. The term genocide is used for the first time, coined by Polish-Jewish lawyer Raphael Lemkin specifically to describe what happened to the Jews. The evidence is overwhelming. Captured Nazi documents proving Hitler's orders. Testimonies from Haas, the Auschwitz commandant. Statistics compiled by Soviet and Allied investigators. Physical evidence. The gas chambers, the crematoria, the warehouses of plunder. Rudolf Haas, brought to Nuremberg as a witness, testifies calmly about the murder operation. "I commanded Auschwitz until December 1943. During that time, approximately 2.5 million victims were executed and exterminated there by gassing and burning. At least another 500,000 died of starvation and disease, making a total of about 3 million dead." Historians will later revise the total to 1.1 million, but Haas's testimony confirms the systematic nature of the killings. The verdicts: Hermann Göring, death, suicide before execution. Hans Frank, death, hanged. Wilhelm Frick, death, hanged. 12 defendants total, hanged. 7 defendants, prison sentences. 3 defendants, acquitted, but thousands of perpetrators escaped justice. Flee to South America. Live quiet lives under assumed names. Die of old age. Justice is incomplete, but the historical record is established. The truth is documented. The deniers are refuted. Liberation is not the end. It is barely the beginning. The survivors face months, years of recovery, physical and psychological. Malnutrition has destroyed their bodies. Starvation has weakened hearts, lungs, organs. Diseases, typhus, tuberculosis, kill hundreds in the weeks after liberation despite medical care. But the psychological wounds are deeper. Survivor's guilt. Why did I live when my family died? Trauma, nightmares, flashbacks, PTSD decades before that term exists. Loss of faith. How can just God allow Auschwitz? Many survivors cannot speak about their experiences. Too painful, too incomprehensible. Dr. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who survived Auschwitz, will write, "Man's search for meaning, exploring how some prisoners maintain their humanity while others succumb to despair. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. By May 1945, the war in Europe is over, but for Jewish survivors, the nightmare continues. They cannot go home, because home no longer exists. Entire Jewish communities in Poland, Hungary, Lithuania, erased. Shtetls emptied, families murdered, synagogues destroyed, and those who try to return face anti-Semitism from the people who took over their homes and businesses. In Kielce, Poland, July 1946, over a year after liberation, a pogrom breaks out. 42 Jews are murdered by a Polish mob. The message is clear. Jews are not welcome to return, so they live in displaced persons DP, camps, limbo, waiting for somewhere, anywhere, to take them. The United States restricts immigration. Britain blocks entry to Palestine. Other countries close their borders. Hundreds of thousands of survivors live in DP camps for years, refugees in the continent where they were born. Only the creation of Israel in 1948 provides a refuge, though even that comes at the cost of war. Slowly, the survivors scatter across the globe. To Israel, 136,000 Holocaust survivors emigrate to the new Jewish state by 1953. They fight in the 1948 War of Independence. They rebuild lives. They have children. They call it the generation after the catastrophe. To America, tens of thousands arrive under the Displaced Persons Act of 1948. They change their names, learn English, build businesses, try to become normal. To Canada, Australia, South America, anywhere that will take them. But they carry Auschwitz with them, the numbers tattooed on their arms, the memories they cannot speak, the nightmares that never end. Many never speak about their experiences, even to their own children. We want to protect you, survivor Renee Firestone will explain decades later. We wanted you to grow up happy, so we stayed silent. But silence has its own cost. Children growing up sensing trauma. They don't understand. Families fractured by unspoken pain. The children of survivors, the second generation, grow up in the shadow of the Holocaust. They sense their parents' trauma. They notice the silences, the flinching at loud noises, the hoarding of food, the inability to throw anything away. Some parents are overprotective. Some are emotionally distant. Some cannot bear to let their children out of sight. Eva Fogelman, a psychologist and daughter of survivors, writes, "We grew up with ghosts, the siblings our parents lost, the grandparents we never met, the aunts, uncles, cousins erased before we were born. We are the generation that carries their memory. We are the ones who must tell the story when the survivors are gone. And now, in the 21st century, the third generation comes of age, the grandchildren of survivors. They visit Auschwitz. They participate in the March of the Living. They ask questions their grandparents could never answer. They ensure the memory survives, even as the last survivors pass away." Rudolf Haas, the commandant of Auschwitz from 1940 to 1943, is captured by British forces in 1946. He testifies at Nuremberg with chilling calmness about the murder operations, as if discussing factory production quotas. He is then extradited to Poland to stand trial specifically for crimes at Auschwitz. At his trial in Warsaw, 1947, he shows no remorse. "I had no feelings in carrying out these orders. I was simply following commands. The mass extermination of the Jews was necessary to secure Germany's future." He is found guilty, sentenced to death. April 16, 1947. Rudolf Haas is hanged at Auschwitz on the grounds of the camp he commanded. The gallows are erected next to the crematorium. The site of his crimes becomes the site of his execution. His final words, "I have served Germany." No mention of his victims. No acknowledgement of the 1.1 million murdered under his command. The ultimate expression of what Hannah Arendt will later call the banality of evil. The ability of ordinary men to commit extraordinary atrocities and feel nothing. Joseph Mengele, the camp doctor who conducted barbaric medical experiments on prisoners, especially twins, escapes justice entirely. In the chaos of Germany's collapse, he flees. He uses false papers. He crosses into Italy, then Argentina in 1949. He lives openly in Buenos Aires under his real name for years. The Argentine government, sympathetic to former Nazis, refuses to extradite him. When Israeli agents capture Adolf Eichmann in 1960, Mengele panics. He flees to Paraguay, then Brazil. He lives in hiding for 30 years. Never brought to trial. Never forced to face his victims. He drowns while swimming in Brazil in 1979. A stroke. Death by natural causes. His body is exhumed and identified in 1985 through DNA testing. Confirmed, Joseph Mengele died free. For survivors, this is unbearable. The man who conducted experiments on children, who selected who would live and who would die with a flick of his finger, who embodied the sadism of Auschwitz. He died peacefully. He was never punished. Justice delayed is justice denied. July 15th, 2015. Lüneburg, Germany. 94-year-old Oscar Groening stands trial for being an accessory to the murder of 300,000 Hungarian Jews at Auschwitz in 1944. Groening was not a guard. He was an accountant. He counted the money stolen from arriving prisoners. He sorted their currency. But under German law, anyone who facilitated the functioning of Auschwitz is guilty of accessory to murder. Groening makes a remarkable choice. He testifies openly. I ask for forgiveness. I share moral guilt. But I was a small cog in the machine. I did not kill anyone directly. Survivors in the courtroom respond. Eva Kor, an 81-year-old survivor of Mengele's experiments. I appreciate his admission of guilt, but 70 years late is still 70 years too late. My family was murdered. No apology brings them back. The court finds Groening guilty, sentences him to 4 years in prison. He appeals. Legal battles ensue. He dies in 2018, age 96, before serving a day in prison. But the trial matters. It establishes a principle. There is no statute of limitations on genocide. No one is too old. No role too minor. Justice may be delayed, but it is not abandoned. Between 1945 and 2020, only about 6,000 of an estimated 200,000 Auschwitz perpetrators face any legal consequences. Most live normal lives, raise families, die peacefully. The vast majority escaped justice entirely. In 1947, the Polish government establishes the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum. The decision preserved the site exactly as it was. The barracks, the fences, the ruins of the crematoria, the railway tracks leading into Birkenau. This will be a place of memory, a place of education, a warning. In 1979, UNESCO designates Auschwitz a World Heritage Site, the first site designated primarily for its negative historical significance. Today, over 2 million people visit Auschwitz annually. Students, survivors, world leaders, ordinary people seeking to understand. They walk through the gate, Arbeit macht free. They stand on the selection ramp where life and death were decided with a gesture. They see the suitcases, the shoes, the hair. They enter the barracks where prisoners slept, 5 to a bunk designed for 1. They stand in the ruins of the gas chambers, destroyed by the Nazis, preserved as evidence by history. And they confront a question. How did this happen? How did modern, civilized Europe produce Auschwitz? Every year on Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, thousands of young people participate in the March of the Living. They walk the 3 kilometers from Auschwitz to Birkenau, retracing the path prisoners walked. But they walk in freedom. They walk to remember. They walk to say, we will not forget. We will not let this happen again. Survivors join them. Fewer each year as time passes. Ben Helfgott, a survivor who returned to Auschwitz 70 times to speak to young people. I come back because I must. Because when we are gone, you will be the witnesses. You will carry our testimony. You did not live through Auschwitz, but you must live with the knowledge of Auschwitz. You must understand what humans are capable of, so you can prevent it. Participants come from Israel, Germany, Poland, the United States, from all over the world. They are Jewish and non-Jewish. They are the generation that never knew the survivors personally, but they know the stories, and they pledge never again. Despite overwhelming evidence, Holocaust denial persists. Fringe groups claim Auschwitz was a labor camp, not an extermination center. They claim the gas chambers were built after the war by Soviets. They claim the testimonies are fabricated. This is not historical debate. It is anti-Semitic propaganda designed to rehabilitate Nazism. The evidence is irrefutable. 1. Physical evidence. The ruins of the gas chambers and crematoria still stand. 2. Documentary evidence. Captured Nazi records detailing the killings. 3. Photographic evidence. Images taken by SS, by liberators, by survivors. 4. Testimonies. Thousands of survivor accounts, consistent across decades. 5. Perpetrator confessions. Haas Eichmann and others admitted the Holocaust at trial. 6. Demographics. 6 million European Jews disappeared. Where did they go? Historian Deborah Lipstadt, who famously defeated Holocaust denier David Irving in court in 2000. Deniers are not historians. They are anti-Semites using the language of scholarship to spread hate. We do not debate them. We expose them. In 2020, a survey found that 63% of American young adults did not know that 6 million Jews were murdered in the Holocaust. 36% thought the number was fewer than 2 million. This is why Auschwitz must be preserved, why education must continue, why survivors share their testimonies despite the pain. Because forgetting is the second death, and denial is the desecration of graves. Auschwitz has become a pilgrimage site for world leaders, a place where they acknowledge history and make pledges for the future. 1979, Pope John Paul II, the Polish Pope, visits. He kneels at the wall of death where prisoners were executed. He prays in Hebrew. He calls Auschwitz the Golgotha of the modern world. 1989, Polish President-elect Walesa visits, acknowledging Polish complicity and Polish resistance. 2009, President Barack Obama visits. He writes in the guest book, "We have an obligation to prevent such horror from ever happening again." 2020, 75th anniversary of liberation. World leaders gather. German Chancellor Angela Merkel speaks. Remembering the crimes of the past is a responsibility that never ends. It belongs inseparably to our country. To be aware of this responsibility is part of our national identity. These visits matter. They signal that Auschwitz is not just Polish history or Jewish history. It is human history, a crime against humanity itself. And the obligation to remember and to prevent recurrence belongs to all of us. January 27th, 2020, the 75th anniversary of Auschwitz's liberation. About 200 survivors return for the commemoration. They are elderly now, in their 80s and 90s. They know this may be their last visit. They wear striped scarves, echoing the prisoner uniforms, as a badge of witness. They light candles. They embrace each other. They weep for those who did not survive. Marian Tursky, a 93-year-old survivor, speaks. Auschwitz did not fall from the sky. It began with small steps, with discrimination, with scapegoating, with the erosion of empathy. And so I say to the young people, do not be indifferent. Do not stand by when others are dehumanized. Because Auschwitz happened because too many people were indifferent. These are the last survivors. Within a decade or two, all first-hand witnesses will be gone. The world will move from the era of living memory to the era of historical memory. And the responsibility will shift to educators, to historians, to you, to carry the testimony forward. When I am gone, survivor Elie Wiesel said before his death in 2016, I want my testimony to live. I want my words to bear witness when I can no longer speak. The last survivors are passing the torch. The question is, will we carry it? After the Holocaust, the world said, never again. The United Nations was founded in 1945. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. The Genocide Convention in 1948. But the promise was broken. Again and again. Cambodia, 1975 to 1979. Khmer Rouge murders 1.7 million. Fields of skulls. Bosnia, 1995. Srebrenica massacre. 8,000 Muslim men and boys executed. In Europe, 50 years after Auschwitz. Rwanda, 1994. 800,000 Tutsis murdered in 100 days. Machetes and hate radio. Darfur, 2003. Present. Hundreds of thousands killed. Millions displaced. Ethnic cleansing. Rohingya, 2017. Mass atrocities in Myanmar. Villages burned. Families slaughtered. Uyghurs in China, 2014. Present. Over 1 million detained in concentration camps. Forced labor. Cultural genocide. The world learned the lessons of Auschwitz, but did not apply them. Genocide did not end. It adapted, changed form, moved to new continents. Never again became never again asterisk, with an asterisk, with conditions, with political calculations. Auschwitz teaches us that genocide is possible, that ordinary people can become killers, that industrial states can turn their machinery toward mass murder, but we have not yet learned how to stop it. 80 years after Auschwitz, anti-Semitism is rising again. United States, synagogue shootings. Pittsburgh, 2018, 11 dead. Poway, 2019, 1 dead. Charlottesville, 2017, neo-Nazis chanting, "Jews will not replace us." Europe, attacks on Jews in France, Germany, UK. Jewish schools requiring armed guards. Rabbis advised not to wear kippah in public. Online, conspiracy theories. The Great Replacement. QAnon blood libels. Holocaust denial on social media. According to the Anti-Defamation League, anti-Semitic incidents in the U.S. reached record highs in 2021 to 2023. Surveys show rising percentages of young people embracing anti-Semitic stereotypes, often without knowing history. Survivors watch in horror. Is their testimony not enough? Have we learned nothing? Marian Tursky, 95-year-old survivor. I survived Auschwitz to warn the world. But the world is not listening. The same hatred that led to Auschwitz, it's still here. The language is different. The symbols are new, but the hatred is the same. Auschwitz is a warning, but warnings only work if people heed them. The solution, the only solution, is education. Teaching the Holocaust, not just dates and numbers, but the human stories, the choices, the consequences. Teaching about the perpetrators, how ordinary people became killers, the power of propaganda, the danger of dehumanization. Teaching about the bystanders, the nations that closed their borders, the people who looked away, the price of indifference. Teaching about the resistors, the righteous among the nations who risked their lives to save Jews. Proof that courage was possible. And teaching about the survivors, their resilience, their testimony, their commitment to ensuring the world remembers. Today, Holocaust education is mandatory in many countries. Museums, memorial sites, testimony archives. The USC Shoah Foundation, founded by Steven Spielberg, has recorded 55,000 survivor testimonies, digitally preserved for future generations. Virtual reality experiences allow students to walk through Auschwitz. AI technology creates interactive conversations with holographic survivors. But technology is not enough. Education is not just information. It's formation. It's moral development. Students must learn not just what happened, but why it matters, why they should care, why they must act when they see injustice. The ultimate lesson of Auschwitz is personal. It's not just about learning history. It's about asking, what would I have done? Would I have been a perpetrator, a bystander, a resistor? And more importantly, what will I do now when I see injustice today? Holocaust survivor Gerda Weissman-Klein, speaking to students. I don't ask you to remember me. I ask you to remember the lessons. When you see someone marginalized, will you speak up? When you encounter hate speech, will you challenge it? When your government scapegoats a minority, will you resist? These are not abstract questions. These are the choices that determine whether Auschwitz remains a unique horror or becomes a template. The sociologist Zygmunt Bauman wrote that the Holocaust revealed modernity's dark potential. Bureaucracy, technology, industrial efficiency, all put to the service of murder. The question is, will we use our bureaucracy, technology, and efficiency for justice or for oppression? Auschwitz is a mirror. It shows us what humans are capable of at their worst, but it also shows us what we must be at our best: vigilant, compassionate, courageous. Every year on January 27th, International Holocaust Remembrance Day, candles are lit at Auschwitz. One candle for each lost life will require 1.1 million flames. Instead, thousands light a few, symbols of the millions. And in those flickering lights, a message emerges. Remember the dead, their names, their stories, their stolen futures. Honor the survivors, their courage, their testimony, their refusal to let hate win. Learn from the perpetrators. How ordinary people commit extraordinary evil. How systems enable atrocities. Challenge the bystanders. How silence enables violence. How indifference becomes complicity. Celebrate the rescuers. How individual courage can save lives. How goodness persists even in darkness. Auschwitz is not just a place in Poland. It is a symbol, a warning, a responsibility. It reminds us that civilization is fragile, that progress is not inevitable, that vigilance is required in every generation, and it calls us to action, to defend human dignity, to resist dehumanization, to speak out against injustice, not because we are Jewish, not because we are German or Polish or Russian, but because we are human, and what was done at Auschwitz was a crime against humanity itself. January 27th, 2045, the 100th anniversary of Auschwitz's liberation. No survivors will be alive to attend, but their testimonies will be there, preserved in video, in AI, in the stories passed down through generations. And millions of people, children not yet born today, will stand at Auschwitz and ask the same questions. How did this happen? Could it happen again? What can I do to prevent it? The answers lie not in the past, but in the choices we make every day, in how we treat the stranger, in how we respond to hate, in how we defend the vulnerable. Auschwitz is not just history. It is prophecy, a warning of what happens when we forget our humanity. And it is a charge, a sacred obligation to ensure that the 1.1 million who died there did not die in vain. They died as victims, but they live as witnesses. And we, all of us, are responsible for carrying their testimony forward. Never forget, never again, not just words, a commitment. This is the day the camp was liberated. But the liberation is not complete until we liberate the world from the hatred that created Auschwitz. That work continues, and it belongs to all of us. Thank you for watching this documentary. If you found this documentary meaningful, please subscribe, and share.